Good evening and thanks for joining us on Tracking the Tropics. We've got the latest advisory now at 7 p.m. And again, we are continuing to see more intensification going on within Laura at this point. Right now, it's on the verge of becoming a Category 5 hurricane. Right now, we've got winds sustained at 150 miles per hour. So again, it doesn't have to go long until it gets to Category 5 strength. Regardless if it becomes a Category 5, it's still a very strong Category 4, and it can do a lot of damage. But first, I do want to talk about the local impacts here. We've already seen multiple tornado warnings across the area. They continue to piggyback off each other throughout the afternoon and early evening. In fact, we just got a new tornado warning issued out there now for Tangipahoa Parish. And again, that is in effect until about, again, what is it? In effect until 8 o'clock this evening. So again, it's Doppler indicated, but there is that potential for an isolated thunderstorm just around Covington and Madisonville, and it's heading northwest at 20 miles per hour. So you can see some of those outside feeder bands. That's what's been playing a big role here in the capital area recently. That's where we had those very strong thunderstorms, some heavy rain at times in the 2 to even 3 inch range. Obviously, you can see where Laura sits right now, obviously a few miles south, but we are getting reports of tropical storm force winds just along the coastline, just around Vermilion Bay. And notice that red box, that is a tornado watch until 9 o'clock this evening. You see here, we got the possibility of more tornadoes throughout the overnight hours. It does not take much for tornadoes to kind of spawn in this type of environment, so just be on the lookout. A lot of these tornadoes are brief spin-ups and very quick, and we're moving into the evening hours. You won't be able to see them, and a lot of them are going to be rain wrapped, so again, you won't also be able to see them because we're seeing torrential downpours or visibility drops pretty quickly out there. You can see that we've got a couple more thunderstorms kind of sliding into the area at this point. You can see that new tornado warning, and that's just around the Hammond area. Once again, that is Doppler indicated, and I think the key here is we're talking mainly for Tangipahoa Parish, but what we're watching is, again, that potential for a brief spin up. And again, it's mainly for the cities of Robert, Ponchatoula, Hammond, and Nottowbaney until about 7:45, 8 o'clock this evening. So again, we're talking maybe temporary touchdowns, but just enough, obviously, to cause some issues. And it's right on the outskirts of our viewing area. You can see again here, this is where we're kind of watching as it heads towards the northeast. But if you do fall in this red cone, now is the time to take shelter immediately. Find that safe place, interior room inside your house, well away from windows, and that way you don't have to worry about flying debris. But again, we've got more storms kind of firing up, and obviously you can see the winds are now up to 150 miles per hour. They did have some gusts up to about 155, so again, a beast of a storm, a very huge eye at this point. We're still looking at tropical storm force winds extending about 175 miles from the center, hurricane force winds at about 60 miles now. So again, it's a rather large wind field with this system heading north-northwest now. So it has taken, if you can notice, right about here, it's taking a more of a northward jog. That's why they gave it the north-northwest now. And you see it kind of moving back, kind of wobbling back and forth a little bit here, back, forth, and then heading almost due north. So does it head a little bit further west, back towards Lake Charles, or does it actually make landfall a little bit in between? And you see, again, we're really not worried about, I mean, we're looking at the water vapor just to see if there's any wind shear, if there's any dry air getting sucked into the system. A little shear, but I don't think it's going to do much before making landfall. No dry air getting sucked into the system, so I still think it has a chance to actually reach Category 5 strength before landfall. And then notice, once it gets inland by early morning, I think landfall midnight, maybe about 1 o'clock in the morning, and then it rapidly weakens. That's the key here. That's the good thing. That's when the wind shear catches up. And by the time it gets to the northern half of the state, it's already down to, I would say, a tropical storm, maybe a weak hurricane just around I-20. Then it hooks its way through the Tennessee Valley and then drives into the mid-Atlantic states. But as you see there, gusts 175 miles per hour. And that's going to be a pretty persistent wind, really, for multiple hours. We're talking possibly up to 12 to, maybe even more than that. So again, trees are going to come down. They're going to, we're going to be seeing widespread catastrophic damage across much of the southwestern portion of the state. So here's the deal. As you see moving inland, and this is our model, the reason I want to show you this is because it took just a track slightly further east and watch those rain bands. That's my biggest concern. Starting out around 2 o'clock in the morning, those rain bands could start here in the capital area. We could be seeing some very strong winds, obviously tropical storm strength, also torrential rain, maybe the possibility of 2 to 3 inches per hour, and then the chance for more tornadoes that could spawn early morning. So again, we're talking overnight. While you're sleeping, just be well aware that that could be that threat. So if you decide to go to bed, keep your phone on and handy. Turn it up, make sure it's charged, because potentially by the time you wake up, you may not have power because of these storms kind of rumbling through. Notice we're talking around 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, and that band has barely budged across the capital area. And finally by 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, it finally moves east. And then by the time it gets to about early afternoon, it's now sitting in New Orleans. But the key here is we're talking maybe a time frame of about 6 to 8 hours where it could be sitting directly on top of us at 2 to 3 inches per hour. Do the math. Again, that's a lot of rainfall. And our concern is mainly for those Florida parishes and southern Mississippi, because all of that water on the east side of the Mississippi River filters into the Amite River Basin. And then we have to watch our water levels very closely, because again, we had Marco, we had a lot of that water get pushed inland, and we've already had some issues out there along the lake. So we could see some backwater flooding in a lot of locations. And notice we may even see another batch of storms kind of slide through as we head into your Friday. So here are the current alerts. Wind advisory for the east side of the Mississippi. Tropical storm force winds or warnings on the western side. And as soon as you get to Acadiana, everything really west of there is now underneath a hurricane warning. Percentage or possibility for tropical storm force winds here in the capital area. We only have to reach 39 miles per hour. And guess what? That sits pretty high at almost 100%. And you see here the wind field, obviously from our model, by the time we get to roughly midnight, we could be seeing winds at 40 plus here. Lake Charles, 81, 127 near the coast, moving inland. Again, you can see how those winds are going to continue to persist at 40 or more for multiple hours. And as you see, if we get all that heavy rainfall with these bands, the concern is, again, with very saturated soils, it doesn't take much for those trees to topple. In fact, again, that's the concern. We're talking overnight. We're probably going to see a lot of ponding water in some locations. You got to remember that our roots, our tap roots don't go down deep. In fact, they kind of go outward from the tree. And that's where you start to see the entire tree kind of rip up, because there's nothing really holding that tree really to the surface when the ground becomes so saturated. So again, still the possibility of near 50-mile-an-hour winds heading into Thursday morning. Chance for even some gusty winds going into midday on Thursday. Storm surge watch for the entire coastline. And here's the big deal out there. This is why they said unsurvivable storm surge. We're talking 2 stories, 20 feet of water just south of Lake Charles. Again, that's just unimaginable. And you can see how far inland that water could push, possibly across I-10. You know where that big bridge is when you head to Lake Charles, even further, obviously pushing inland into that bay. So again, I'm glad they did some mandatory evacuations in the area. And you can see we've also got a flash flood watch for the entire viewing area through Thursday. Could potentially get extended a little bit longer. Right now on average 3 to 5 expected, but locally in those rain bands we could see some higher amounts, maybe 8 to 12 inches of rainfall. You can see where some of these bands are starting to set up just around Lake Charles. Probably about halfway around Jennings area, and you can see another band moving into the capital area with some very heavy rainfall. Let's hope the majority of the rainfall actually sits on the west side of the Mississippi, because that should all drain right into the Atchafalaya Basin. So estimated rainfall 3 to 5, higher amounts and rain bands, winds on average 25, 35, but gusting up to 40, maybe 60, near hurricane strength on the west side of the Mississippi. And I think the biggest threat will be those isolated tornadoes kind of spawning through the overnight hours and that dangerous storm surge along the coastline. Make sure you download our free app. It's got all the information you need to guide you through these storms overnight. Make sure it's charged up. Your phone, make sure it's ready to go overnight for the possibility of those power outages and the potential for some tree damage. Obviously, the app has everything you need to know about closures, about road conditions, about you name it. It has the information up there. We're going to have more information coming up later on tonight. We'll have another update coming up at 8, so make sure you tune in. Thank you.